I'm Stumpy Nubs, this is Mustache Mike, and we're about to take you behind the sawdust. Let's get started with woodworking news.
Mahogany isn't just for high-end projects anymore, and we've got Africa to thank for it. Jennifer Hicks of Woodshop News reports that while genuine Honduran mahogany is still expensive, African varieties have become more available, and they cost about half as much. In fact, fewer hardwood dealers are even carrying the South American species because everyone has gone African. Mahogany is a stunningly beautiful wood that is a pleasure to work with. If you've been holding back on trying some on your own furniture projects, you might want to read the article we have linked in the show notes below.
The 2015 Woodworking Industry Conference is being held in San Antonio this week. It's been billed as one industry conference you cannot afford to miss. Unfortunately, I missed it. But thousands poured into the Grand Hyatt to see machinery from all segments of the industry and to build important business relationships. Our insider reports that at an exclusive after-party, a fat man wearing a Davy Crockett costume wrestled a grizzly table saw into submission while hordes of salesmen, buzzed on scotch and soda, removed their shirts and attempted to storm the Alamo. No one was hurt, but a statue of Sam Houston was defaced with a pair of suspenders and a page hat.
Having trouble creating angled and tapered mortises in Sketchup? Pro Woodworking 3D modeler David Richards has a solution. He says the push-pull tool won't work for this task because it only moves flat faces in or out. To take a flat face and turn it into an angled face, you should be using the move tool to select the end of your mortise, then sketch it to the angle you need. Sound confusing? Don't worry. He's made a short video about it. Check it out in the show notes.
A simple case of mistaken identity? Last week, the Huffington Post reported that Matthew Kenny stripped off his clothes and ran down a Fort Lauderdale street looking for a car to run him over so that people whom he imagined had stolen his clothes would stop chasing him. When police finally apprehended the streaker, he told them that he'd rather die than be caught by his shadowy pursuers. It didn't take long for the authorities to determine that Matthew was under the influence of a street drug called flakka. While few woodworkers have ever heard of flakka, many are aware that Fine Woodworking senior editor Matthew Kenny is a Florida native, and he seems to have been out sick during the incident in question. His fellow Shop Talk Live hosts caught on to that point as well, and had a little fun at his expense in their latest podcast. If you're watching, Matt, put your clothes back on and come to work. We're here for you, buddy. We'll get through this together.
Speaking of Matthew Kenny, he was recently featured in a great video about making shaker boxes. It's only 3 minutes long, but it covers all of the steps in this traditional craft, from steam bending to tacking. I've always admired the simplicity of shaker boxes, and they make great gifts too. So check out the video with the link in the show notes, and if you want more detailed information, you can find it in the companion article by Pete Baxter in Fine Woodworking issue number 247.
Prevent a cut nail explosion disaster. That's the title of Chris Schwartz's popular woodworking blog. The hand tool woodworker loves using old-fashioned cut nails, but they can wreak havoc on your workpiece, especially near the end of the panel. While cut nails are less prone to splitting in some cases, their wedge shape can be a big problem if you don't use them properly. Chris explains that you need to size the nails to the thickness of your stock. Pounding big nails into thin boards is risky, even with pilot holes. But there is a way around the problem that involves a bar clamp. It's a great idea that you need to read for yourself over at his blog.
Jeff Burks, our favorite old-timey woodworking literature enthusiast, has dug up an 1892 article about grindstones. Now, before you slide to the edge of your seat over this exciting subject, consider how little things have changed over the last 130 years. The article begins by bemoaning the fact that most grindstones set in the dark obscure corners of workshops where they aren't easily accessible and rarely ready for a quick sharpening. So the craftsmen work with dull tools or ignore the chips and the edges that bench stones won't effectively remove. The author suggested moving the stone to a central location and requiring all woodworkers to use it and maintain it. You probably don't have a big pedal-driven grindstone in your shop, but the principle applies to all tools, for sharpening or otherwise. If you keep it on a shelf under a pile of dust and clutter, it's not going to do you any good. Tools are expensive and time is valuable. Those are facts that never change.
Thinking of doing some carving? Should you buy a whole set or just a few tools? That was the subject of Glenn Huey and Chuck Bender's recent 360 Woodworking audio podcast. Chuck bought his first set on a whim while looking through a hardware store window in Switzerland years ago. He got 12 tools in the set, and all this time later, he's only ever used about half of them. That's why he's against buying sets. He uses a total of about 8 different tools for 90% of his work. The tools you use have as much to do with the way you are taught as the type of work you plan on doing. Chuck learned as a kid from a carver in Pennsylvania who started him off with an old bull-nosed molding plane iron. He had to learn to use that tool first, which forced him to learn to read the grain and to slice the fibers properly. Then he could add tools as his skills progressed. That's a good way to save a bundle on tools you may never really use. They also go into sharpening your tools, but you'll have to go listen to the podcast for that.
Here at Behind the Sawdust, we try to take you behind the scenes in the woodworking world. But some people have been wondering what's been going on behind the scenes at the Stumpy Nubs workshop. In other words, when will we see some new homemade woodworking machines? Well, Stumpy's here to give you the answer that you've been waiting for.
We've got a bunch of new homemade shop machines that we're almost finished with. First is a Shop-Vac Cyclone, which is designed to increase the efficiency of your vacuum and keep your filters from clogging. We also did some major surgery to the vacuum itself to eliminate the need for a separate dustbin underneath the Cyclone. We've just finished building a table saw super sled, which is by far the most fully featured crosscut sled you have ever seen. Not only does it make crosscuts and miter cuts, it has 3 micro-adjustable jig attachments for making splined miters, tenons and bridle joints and finger joints. It also has replaceable inserts and extendable wings with stops for measuring, which are also micro-adjustable. We've just finished up 2 new table saw accessories. The first is a homemade table saw fence. It's designed for those of you who have inexpensive saws but might have crappy fences on them, or for people who just want the additional features that this fence offers. Another thing common to European saws is an attached sliding table which replaces one of the wings on your saw. We're making a homemade version that can be attached to just about any saw and will be a whole lot cheaper than buying an expensive aftermarket version. We've made a unique downdraft sanding table with T-tracks built right in, so you can support your work, clamp it in place, use a variety of accessories. This thing is awesome. For those of you with a small shop, we're building a complete workstation that combines almost an entire workshop, including a table saw, our sliding router table, our jigsaw, our downdraft table, our new sliding crosscut table, and a lot more, all in a 4x8 footprint. And finally, we've just wrapped up a unique 3-wheel bandsaw design that gives you a full 24 inches of capacity in a compact space. If you've been thinking of building a homemade bandsaw, you're going to want to see this.
We are working on downloadable plans for all 7 of these new projects, and then we'll start filming videos showing you how they were built and how they will work. Be sure to sign up for the newsletter at stumpynubs.com and keep an eye on our Facebook page so you don't miss out on these or any of the other big projects we have in the works. Well, that wraps things up for this edition of Behind the Sawdust. You may have noticed that it was shorter than normal. That's because we're experimenting with a 3 short episode a week format rather than 1 long episode a week. We'll post them on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Then when we have a project video, we'll post that on the weekend. This does mean shorter episodes, but more often.
We'll try this for 2 weeks and see how everyone likes it. Leave your opinions in the comments below. In the meantime, you can sit back and have yourself a cold one, because you've earned it, my friend.